The station called Vayara Prime floated in the dead black of space like a city made of glass and metal. It was the largest military training academy in the entire Galactic Coalition, and every year it swallowed thousands of recruits from hundreds of different worlds. They came in scared, confused, and soft. They left as soldiers, or they did not leave at all. Sergeant Instructor Calvith stood in the processing hall with his 4 arms crossed over his chest. His body was covered in dark brown chitin plates that clicked softly when he moved. He had been a soldier for 32 years and an instructor for 12 more. He had trained Gorath, who could crush stone with their bare hands. He had trained Ilyari, who could read thoughts across a room. He had trained Pelinari, who could breathe underwater for days without rest. He had seen every kind of recruit the galaxy could offer. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. The new roster for Platoon 07 appeared on his data pad. He scrolled through the names without much interest. 8 Gorath Heavy Worlders, good, 4 Ilyari Telepaths, useful, 3 Pelinori Aquatics, fine, 2 Crystalline Vethani, fragile but clever. And then, at the bottom of the list, 4 names he did not recognize from any known military species. Avarez, Tamaza Choa, Lena Vazik, Daishi Akefer. Species human, homeworld Earth, Sol system. Calvith stopped scrolling. He had heard of Earth. Every senior officer in the Coalition had received a briefing about it 6 months ago when the small blue planet had been officially contacted and given provisional membership. But he had never actually met a human before. Nobody in the Academy had. This was the first year Earth had been allowed to send military volunteers. He pulled up Earth's file. It required a clearance level that made him raise the ridges above his eyes. He entered his code and began reading. The file opened with a geological summary. Earth had active tectonic plates that shifted and crashed into each other, creating massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Its core was made of molten iron that generated a magnetic field strong enough to deflect solar radiation. The planet had ice caps that expanded and retreated over thousands of years. It had seasons that swung temperatures by 60 degrees in some regions. It had oceans that covered 70% of its surface, filled with predators that had been killing for 400 million years. Calvith kept reading. The biological summary was worse. Earth's surface hosted an estimated 8 million species of life, nearly all of which were engaged in a constant struggle to eat or avoid being eaten. The dominant species, humans, had no natural armor, no venom, no claws worth mentioning, no telepathy, and no ability to regenerate lost limbs. They were soft-skinned, slow compared to most predators, and physically unremarkable. And yet they had conquered their entire planet. The file explained how humans were persistent predators. In their early history, they had hunted animals not by being faster or stronger, but by chasing them for hours, sometimes for an entire day. They would follow a creature under the burning sun, walking and jogging while the animal sprinted, rested, sprinted again, and slowly overheated. The human would never stop. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and the human would simply walk up to it and kill it. Calvith read that paragraph twice, then he read it a third time. The file continued. Humans had mastered fire over 1 million years ago. They had developed tools, then weapons, then agriculture, then cities, then machines, then nuclear energy, then spaceflight. They had done all of this in a geological blink. Their planet had tried to kill them with ice ages, supereruptions, plagues, and asteroid impacts. They survived every single one. At the bottom of the file was a note from the Coalition Xenobiology Bureau. It was stamped in red and marked with the highest caution rating. Class 12 Deathworld, survivable only by native fauna, do not attempt colonization. Class 12, Calvith had trained soldiers from Class 4 and Class 5 worlds before. He had never even met anyone from a Class 8. The scale only went to 12. Earth sat at the very top. He closed the file and told himself the scientists were being dramatic. Humans were a young species. They had barely left their own system. How dangerous could they really be? The answer walked through the processing hall door 20 minutes later. There were 4 of them, 2 women and 2 men. They wore simple gray uniforms and carried their bags over their shoulders. They were small, not just compared to the Gorath, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and weighed as much as ground vehicles, but compared to almost every other species in the hall. The Ilyari were taller. The Pellinori were wider. Even the thin, glassy Vethani had more visible physical presence. The humans looked around the hall with wide, curious eyes. They did not look scared. They did not look aggressive. They looked interested, like children visiting a new place. A Gorath recruit named Thawne saw them enter and let out a rumbling laugh that shook the air. "These are the Deathworlders," he said to another Gorath beside him. "I have carried heavier things in my pockets." The other aliens murmured in agreement. The humans were clearly the weakest things in the room. Several recruits exchanged looks that said the same thing. The coalition had made a mistake letting them in. Kael'veth watched the 4 humans find their assigned places in the formation. They moved quietly and efficiently. They did not push or shove. They did not try to make themselves look bigger. They simply found their spots and stood still. One of them, the woman listed as Corporal Avarez, caught Kael'veth looking at her. She gave him a small, polite smile. Across the room, Scylla, the Ilyari telepath, suddenly stiffened. Another Ilyari touched her arm. "What is wrong?" Scylla shook her head slowly. She had instinctively reached out to read the emotions of the new arrivals, as she did with every new person she met. What she found in the smiling human woman made her pull back like she had touched something hot. "I do not know," Scylla whispered. "Something about her feels wrong, not evil, not angry, just too much. Like there is a fire inside her that she keeps in a cage." Kael'veth stepped forward and addressed the full platoon for the first time. His voice was deep and hard and carried across the hall without effort. "Welcome to the Academy. You are Platoon Null 7. You come from different worlds, different species, different lives. None of that matters here. Here you are all the same. Here you are nothing. And if you survive what comes next, you will become something." He paused and looked across their faces. Gorath stone, Ilyari calm, Pellinori wetness, Vethani crystal, and 4 soft, small, smiling humans. "The coalition survives because its soldiers do not break," he said. "That is not a saying. That is a fact. If you can break, this place will find out, and it will send you home." He turned and walked away. Behind him, Corporal Reyes was still smiling. Scylla looked away from her and decided, very firmly, that she would not read that woman's mind again. The first week at the academy was designed to sort the strong from the weak. Every morning began before the station's artificial sun had fully brightened, and every night ended long after it had dimmed. The recruits of Platoon Null 7 ran, climbed, crawled, fought, studied, and suffered together. And very quickly, a natural order began to form. The Gorath dominated every strength exercise. When the platoon was told to lift heavy crates and carry them across the training yard, Thawne and the other Gorath picked them up like toys. Their muscles were dense as rock, packed under thick gray skin that could stop a blade. They were built for power, and they knew it. The Ilyari dominated the tactical simulations. Working together through their telepathic link, they could coordinate movements without speaking a single word. In squad-based exercises, they reacted to threats before anyone else even noticed them. Their minds moved faster together than any individual could match. The Pellinori owned the aquatic modules. In water, they were beautiful and terrifying, cutting through underwater obstacle courses in half the expected time. On land they were slower, but in their element nothing could touch them. And the humans were average. Not bad, not good, just average. They finished strength tests in the middle of the pack. They completed tactical exercises with acceptable but unremarkable scores. They passed every module but never topped a single one. The other recruits treated them the way students treat the quiet kid in class. They did not dislike the humans. They simply did not notice them. Thawne said it plainly one night in the barracks. They are here because of politics. The coalition wants Earth to feel welcome. That is all. Nobody argued with him. It seemed obvious. Then the cracks began to show. It started with the endurance run. The Academy's standard morning run was a 5-kilometer loop around the station's outer ring. It was meant to be challenging but manageable. Most species could complete it, though some struggled. The Gorath were surprisingly slow over distance, their heavy bodies burning energy fast. The Ilyari had long legs but tired quickly. The Pellinori hated running on dry ground. One morning, a scheduling mistake doubled the run to 10 kilometers. The instructors decided to let it play out and observe. By kilometer 6, the Gorath were slowing. Their breathing became heavy and labored. Thawne, the strongest recruit in the platoon, dropped to a walk at kilometer 7. The Ilyari began falling behind at kilometer 8. The Pellinori had stopped completely, their legs cramping on the hard surface. The humans did not slow down. They ran at the same steady pace they had started with. Not fast, not impressive, just constant, like machines that did not know how to turn off. They passed the struggling Gorath without even breathing hard. They passed the Ilyari without looking tired. They finished the full 10 kilometers and stood at the end, stretching casually as if they had just gone for a morning walk. Kael'veth watched from the observation deck. He pulled up a term from Earth's file that he had dismissed before: persistence predation, the ability to simply outlast anything alive. He had thought it was ancient history. Now he watched 4 humans prove it was still in their blood. The second crack came during a grappling exercise. Recruits were paired off for hand-to-hand combat training. Private Tamaz Ochoa, one of the quieter humans, was matched against a mid-sized Gorath. The fight was short. The Gorath threw Ochoa to the ground hard enough to make the floor ring. In the process, 2 of Ochoa's fingers bent sideways with an audible snap. The Rithani medic rushed over and began scanning the damage. The bones were clearly broken. 2 fractures, 1 displaced. The medic reached for a medical discharge form. This kind of injury meant at least a week in the regeneration pod. Ochoa sat up and looked at his hand. The fingers were swollen and twisted at a wrong angle. He flexed them once, winced, and then asked the medic for tape. "Tape," the medic repeated. "Medical tape, to hold them together." The medic stared at him. "Your bones are broken." "I know, they will heal, just tape them for now." The medic looked at Kael'veth, who gave a slow nod. Ochoa's fingers were taped together and he walked back to the training mat. He fought 3 more rounds that day. He lost all 3, but he fought them. With broken fingers, with bones grinding against each other under a thin layer of adhesive. The Gorath who had broken his fingers watched this with an expression that was hard to read. It was not respect exactly. It was something closer to confusion. Pain was supposed to stop you. That was what pain was for. Why was this small creature ignoring it? The third crack was the widest. The environmental survival chamber was a massive room that could simulate almost any planetary condition. Recruits were cycled through extreme heat, extreme cold, low oxygen, and high humidity. Each species had known tolerances. The Gorath thrived in heat but shut down in cold. The Ilyari needed stable, moderate conditions. The Pellinori required high humidity but could not handle dry heat. The chamber cycled through all 4 extremes in one session. Every species struggled with at least 2 of them. Some recruits collapsed. Some had to be pulled out by medics. The humans survived all 4. In the heat, they sweated. Their bodies pushed water through their skin to cool themselves, a process so strange that the Pellinori recruits turned away in disgust. In the cold, they shivered, their muscles vibrating rapidly to generate warmth. In low oxygen, they gasped and panted but slowly adjusted, their breathing changing rhythm as their bodies extracted every molecule of air they could. In the humidity, they simply endured, wet and uncomfortable but functional. Scylla was monitoring the chamber from outside. She felt the humans' bodies through her telepathic sense, and what she felt made her step back from the observation window. Their bodies were at war with themselves. Their internal systems were fighting the environment on every level, making hundreds of tiny adjustments every second. Hearts beating faster, blood vessels expanding and contracting, chemical signals flooding through their brains. It was chaos. Controlled, directed, purposeful chaos. "How do they function like that?" Scylla whispered. Nobody answered her. The last crack that month came during a tactical simulation. The platoon was dropped into a virtual battlefield and told to identify threats. The scenario was based on a real ambush from a border conflict 20 years ago. The aliens spread out and began scanning for enemies using their various abilities. The Ilyari reached out with their minds. The Gorath watched for movement. The Pelennori listened for vibrations in the ground. Corporal Reyes looked at the tree line on the left side of the valley and said, "Ambush. Left flank. The trees do not match the terrain." Everyone stopped. Calveth checked with the simulation operators. Reyes was correct. The ambush was hidden in the left tree line. She had identified it in under 30 seconds, faster than the telepaths, faster than anyone. "How did you know?" Calveth asked her. Reyes seemed to think about it. "It just felt wrong," she said. "The pattern was off. I cannot explain it better than that." Calveth looked up the word later. Intuition. A human subconscious process that analyzed thousands of tiny details without the conscious mind being aware of it. It had evolved over millions of years on a planet where noticing the wrong shape in the grass or the wrong shadow in the trees meant the difference between life and death. It was not magic. It was not telepathy. It was something arguably more frightening. It was a brain that had been built, generation after generation, by death itself. That evening, Calveth sat in his quarters and opened a new report. He had originally planned to recommend that the human recruits be reassigned to non-combat roles. He deleted that recommendation and wrote a new one. Human recruits require further observation. They do not excel in any single area, but they do not fail in any area either. They adapt to every condition. They endure beyond expected limits. They process threats through methods that are not fully understood. Their potential ceiling is unknown. I advise continued integration and close monitoring. He sent the report to command and sat back in his chair. He thought about Ochoa fighting with broken fingers. He thought about Reyes seeing what the telepaths could not see. He thought about 4 soft, small creatures running past the strongest soldiers in the platoon without breaking stride. For the first time in 12 years, Calveth was unsure about what he was training. The shuttle dropped Platoon 07 onto the surface of Malachar 4 just before dawn. The planet was covered in dense jungle, thick with steam, and the sounds of things moving through the dark. The air was heavy and tasted like wet iron. The sky above was a pale green, lit by 2 small moons that hung close together like a pair of watching eyes. Calveth's voice came through their communicators one final time. "You have 5 days. Navigate to the extraction point 40 kilometers north. Arrive as a complete unit. If even one member is missing, the entire platoon fails. You have minimal supplies. Use the land, use each other. Survive." The communicator went dead. The platoon stood in the mud and looked at each other. This was Crucible Week. Every recruit at the academy knew about it. It was the test that broke platoons apart. The instructors dropped you on a hostile world and watched from orbit to see what you were made of. The planet was rated Class 7 on the hazard scale, which meant the wildlife could kill you, the weather could kill you, and the terrain itself could kill you if you were careless. For most species in the Coalition, Class 7 was terrifying. For the humans, it felt strangely familiar. Corporal Reyes gathered the platoon together before they moved out. She did not ask for command. She did not announce herself as leader. She simply started talking and everyone listened. "We move during daylight. We rest in shifts at night. Nobody walks alone, not even to relieve themselves. We stay tight, we stay quiet, and we watch the ground as much as the trees. If something comes at us, we do not scatter. We group up and face it together. Thawin, who weighed 4 times what Ray's did, nodded without argument. Somewhere in the last few weeks, he had stopped laughing at the humans. He could not say exactly when that had changed. The first day passed without major incident. The platoon moved through the jungle in a loose column, cutting through undergrowth and crossing muddy clearings. The heat was crushing. Several Ilyari struggled with the humidity, their sensitive skin flushing dark. The Pellinori were comfortable but slow on the uneven ground. The Goreth pushed through everything by sheer force, snapping branches and stomping through streams. The humans moved like they belonged there. They stepped carefully, watched the canopy, and kept their heads on a swivel. Lena Vazik, the quietest of the 4, walked at the rear of the column and watched the jungle behind them with eyes that never stopped moving. Night fell fast on Malachar 4. The green sky turned black in minutes, and the jungle came alive with sounds that made the Ilyari press their hands over their ears. Clicks, screams, rustling, and something deep and rhythmic that might have been breathing or might have been the planet itself. The platoon made camp in a shallow depression between 2 rock formations. They set a watch rotation and tried to sleep. At the 3rd hour of darkness, something came. It moved through the undergrowth with a wet sliding sound. It was long, as thick as a Gorath's torso, covered in dark scales that reflected no light. It came up from the stream bed below the camp, drawn by the body heat of 23 sleeping beings. Its head was flat and wide, with 4 rows of backward-curving teeth designed to grip and never let go. It was a constrictor, native to Malachar 4, and it had been killing things on this planet for 60 million years. It struck the Pellinori recruit named Dural while he slept. One moment Dural was breathing slowly in the humid air. The next moment, 5 meters of muscle were wrapped around his body, squeezing with a force that cracked the ground beneath him. Dural screamed, a wet, bubbling scream that woke the entire camp. The platoon erupted into chaos. The Goreth scrambled to their feet but could not see the creature in the dark. The Ilyari reached out with their minds and recoiled from the thing's cold, empty brain. The Vethani backed away, their crystalline bodies ringing with fear. Lena Vazik picked up a rock. She did not hesitate. She did not call for help. She walked straight to the creature, found the flat plate of its skull behind the jaw, and brought the rock down with both hands. The impact made a sound like a hammer hitting wet clay. The creature tightened around Dural. Vazik hit it again, and again, and again. 7 times she hit it, each blow landing in the same spot, until the skull cracked open and the coils loosened and the thing slid off Dural and lay twitching in the mud. Vazik checked Dural's breathing first. Then she wiped her hands on her pants and looked at the dead creature the way a farmer looks at a fox that got into the henhouse. "Are you all right?" she asked Dural. He stared at her. Everyone stared at her. "Where I grew up," Vazik said simply, "you learn not to let snakes get comfortable." Nobody slept much after that. On the 3rd day, they reached the river. It was wide and fast and brown with mud. The current was strong enough to pull a Pellinori downstream, and the water was deep enough that the Goreth, with their dense bones and heavy bodies, would sink like stones if they tried to wade across. The platoon stopped at the bank and stared. The extraction point was on the other side. There was no bridge, no shallow crossing, no way around. The river stretched in both directions as far as they could see. Ray studied the water for exactly 2 minutes. Then she turned to the platoon and started giving orders. "Vazik Achoa Akafer, you are with me. We swim across first and anchor ropes on the far bank. Pellinori, you position yourselves downstream as safety catchers in case anyone falls. Goreth, once the ropes are secure, you pull yourselves across hand over hand. Ilyari, you go with the Goreth and keep the line steady with your coordination. Vethani, you ride the Goreth's backs. Nobody touches the water alone." Thawin looked at the river, then at Ray's. "You can swim in that." Ray's was already pulling a coil of rope from her pack. "We will find out." The 4 humans entered the river together. The current hit them immediately, trying to tear them from the bank. They fought it the way they fought everything, not with overwhelming power but with relentless, stubborn refusal to stop. They kicked and pulled and gasped and swallowed water and kept going. It took them almost 20 minutes to cross a distance of 40 meters. When they reached the far bank, they were shaking and exhausted and bleeding from where the rocks had cut their skin. They tied the ropes off and waved the platoon across. Every member of Platoon 07 made it to the other side. On the fourth day, the Vethani recruit named Crystales fell. A loose rock shifted under their foot and they went down hard. The sound was like glass breaking. Their lower leg fractured in two places, the crystalline structure splitting along its natural lines. They could not walk. They could barely move. Coalition training doctrine was clear. Mark the position of the wounded, continue to extraction and send rescue after. No one was expected to carry dead weight through hostile jungle. The mission came first. Ochoa knelt beside Crystales and examined the fracture. Then he looked up at the other three humans. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Ochoa splinted the leg using branches and strips cut from his own uniform. Then the four humans built a stretcher from two long poles and a section of emergency blanket. They lifted Crystales off the ground and began walking. For 11 hours, the humans carried the Vethani recruit through the jungle. They rotated positions every 30 minutes. When one stumbled, another took the weight. When the terrain got steep, all four carried the stretcher together, climbing with their legs burning and their shoulders raw. They did not complain. They did not suggest leaving Crystales behind. They did not even discuss it. Calvith watched from an observation drone and said nothing for a very long time. When they finally stopped to rest, Thawne approached Reyes. "Why?" he asked. "Doctrine says to leave the wounded. The mission is what matters." Reyes looked at him with those steady brown eyes. "We do not leave people behind," she said. "That is not a rule we follow. That is who we are." On the last night, the temperature dropped sharply. The jungle went cold in a way that should not have been possible on this planet. Several species began to slow, their bodies struggling with the sudden change. Ochoa gathered dry wood. Akefer struck sparks from a rock and a blade. Within minutes, a fire was burning in the center of the camp. Several aliens had never seen open flame outside of a weapon. The Ilyari stepped back. The Vethani moved behind the Gorath. Even Thawne watched the fire with wide eyes, his instincts telling him that uncontrolled combustion was dangerous. The humans sat around it like it was an old friend. The warmth spread. Slowly, one by one, the other recruits moved closer. Scylla sat near Reyes and felt the heat on her skin. Through her telepathic sense, she reached toward the humans and felt something she had never felt before. It was old. Older than language, older than thought. It was a feeling of safety that went back 1,000,000 years, to the first time a small, frightened creature on a deadly world had pushed back the darkness with a handful of burning sticks and survived until morning. "Tell us about your world," Scylla said quietly. And the humans did. They sat around the fire on an alien planet and told stories about Earth, about oceans and mountains and cities, about storms and seasons and the way snow looked falling at night, about wars they had fought and mistakes they had made and the people they had lost and the things they had built from the wreckage. The platoon listened until the fire burned low. The next morning they reached the extraction point, all 23 of them, not one member left behind. It was the first time in 6 training cycles that a Crucible platoon had arrived complete. Calvith was waiting at the shuttle. He watched the platoon walk out of the jungle and noticed something that made him very still. The other recruits had arranged themselves around the 4 humans without thinking about it, not in front of them, not behind them, around them, the way a formation naturally organizes around its strongest point. Nobody had given that order. Nobody had planned it. It had just happened. The final evaluation was supposed to be a simulation. A 48-hour wargame inside a controlled environment on the Academy's lower decks. Platoon Null 7 would defend a mock settlement against waves of combat drones that got harder with every round. The instructors would grade them on how long they lasted, how many objectives they held, and whether the platoon stayed together or fell apart. It began at dawn on a Tuesday by station time. The platoon took their positions inside the settlement, a collection of prefabricated buildings arranged around a central square. The first wave came 30 minutes later. 20 drones, basic attack patterns, easy to predict. The Gorath held the two main entrances. Their bodies filled the doorways like living walls, and the drones broke against them like water hitting rock. Thoan alone took down 6 in the first wave. He was grinning, if that is what you could call the expression a Gorath made when they were enjoying themselves. The Ilyari coordinated the platoon's movements from the center. Scylla and the other telepaths linked minds and passed information faster than any radio. When drones flanked left, the platoon knew before the drones had finished turning. When a new wave approached from the south, the defenders were already in position. The Pellinori ran supplies through the drainage channels beneath the settlement, moving ammunition and medical kits to wherever they were needed without exposing themselves to fire. And the humans did what humans always did. They adapted. Rays watched the first 3 waves and found the pattern. The drones were programmed to probe defenses, find weaknesses, and then concentrate force on the weakest point. It was a standard tactical algorithm, predictable, so she made it useless. After every wave, she moved the platoon's positions. She shifted the Gorath to new choke points. She changed the Ilyari's communication patterns. She rearranged the defensive layout so that the weakness the drones had identified no longer existed by the time the next wave arrived. The drone operators watching from the control room had to keep adjusting their strategies, and every time they adjusted, Rays adjusted faster. By the 20th hour, the platoon had not lost a single position. The drone operators increased the difficulty 3 times beyond the scheduled maximum. It did not matter. Rays kept changing the game. But it was not just tactics. The humans brought something else to the fight that the drones could not account for. When a position was overrun, the humans counterattacked with a violence that startled even the Gorath. Ochoa, with his still-taped fingers, cleared a building by himself using a combination of grenades, close combat, and a chair he ripped from the floor and used as a weapon. Vazik set traps in corridors using nothing but furniture, wire, and an understanding of how the drones moved. Akafer held a rooftop alone for 40 minutes against a sustained assault, firing with a calm precision that made the drone operators check if he was actually organic. At the 36th hour, the wargame stopped. Not because the platoon had failed, because something real had happened. A distress signal had come in from a Coalition Science outpost on Malachar 4's second moon. The outpost held 46 researchers studying geological formations. Something had broken through the perimeter. The security cameras showed a creature that the Coalition had classified as a wraith, a semi-corporeal predator that existed somewhere between solid matter and energy. It was fast. It was armored in a way that deflected most standard weapons. It hunted by sensing the electromagnetic fields that all living bodies produced, and it was supposed to be extinct in this sector. It was not extinct, it was inside the outpost, and it was killing people. The nearest rapid response military unit was 4 hours away. Platoon Null 7, still armed and alert from the wargame, was 40 minutes away by shuttle. Coalition Command debated. Academy recruits were not soldiers yet. Sending them against a Class 10 creature was beyond anything training was meant to prepare them for. The risk was too high. The recruits were too green. Kael'veth listened to the debate from the Academy's command center. Then he walked down to the wargame settlement where his platoon was still holding their positions. He looked at them, tired, bruised, 36 hours without sleep, but still standing, still together. He looked at the humans. Reyes was already checking her weapon. She had heard the comms traffic through the open channel. No one had told her to prepare. No one had asked for volunteers. She was simply ready. "Platoon Null 7, Kael'veth said. "There are people in danger. You are not required to go. This is not an order. This is a choice." Reyes did not look at the other humans. She did not need to. "We go," she said. The shuttle dropped them on the moon's surface in a haze of dust and low gravity. The outpost was a cluster of white domes connected by pressurized corridors. Half the lights were out. The main airlock was torn open from the inside. The platoon entered in a tight formation. The Gorath went first, their massive bodies filling the corridors. The Ilyari spread their telepathic awareness ahead, scanning for the creature's mind. The humans moved in the center, weapons up, eyes everywhere. They found the first bodies in the third corridor. 2 researchers, a Pellinari and a small avian species Kael'veth did not recognize. They had been killed quickly. The wraith had not eaten them. It did not need to eat. It killed because that was what it was designed to do. Scylla reached out with her mind and found the creature 2 levels below. It was cold. Not cold like the absence of heat, cold like the absence of everything. An empty space shaped like a predator. She tried to get a sense of its thoughts and found nothing. No fear, no hunger, no anger. Just a machine of instinct wrapped in something that was not quite alive and not quite dead. They found it in the lower laboratory. It was bigger than the files had suggested. Nearly 4 meters long, low to the ground, covered in plates of something that looked like black glass. It moved like smoke, shifting between solid and translucent so fast that the eye could not track it. The platoon attacked. The Gorath charged with everything they had. Their fists hit the creature's body and slid off its shifting surface. Thoin grabbed it by what should have been its neck, and the creature phased through his grip and slashed him across the chest, opening a wound that went to the bone. The Ilyari tried to coordinate a focused psychic assault. The creature emitted a burst of neural static that dropped all 4 telepaths to their knees. Scylla screamed. Blood ran from her nose. The Pellinari tried to flank it. The creature moved faster than anything its size should have been able to move and cornered 3 of them against a wall. Standard tactics were failing. The creature adapted to everything the aliens tried within seconds. It learned Gorath attack patterns after 2 exchanges. It neutralized the Ilyari after 1 attempt. It predicted the Pellinori's movements before they made them. Then the humans stopped fighting like soldiers. Something changed in them. It was not visible in the way a weapon powering up was visible. It was deeper than that. It was as if a door had opened somewhere inside each of them, and what came through it was something very old, something that had been sleeping since the first human ancestor picked up a bone and chose to fight instead of die. Reyes screamed, not a battle cry taught in training, a raw, primal sound torn from somewhere below thought, below language, below anything civilized. It echoed through the laboratory and hit the creature's electromagnetic senses like a flare. The wraith turned toward her, confused by the signal. No prey it had ever hunted had moved toward it while making that sound. In that moment of confusion, Ochoa appeared behind it. He had circled back through a corridor the creature had already cleared, moving through darkness and wreckage that any sane being would have avoided. He fired at the joint where 2 of its armor plates met, a weak point that should not have been visible from his angle. The creature spun toward him and Vazik called out from across the room, "Base of the skull, left side, when it turns." She had been watching it move, not analyzing it with instruments, not scanning it with technology, just watching the way 1,000,000 generations of her ancestors had watched predators on the plains of Earth, reading the body, feeling the rhythm, knowing where the weakness was before the conscious mind could explain why. The creature turned. Akefir was there. The quiet one, the one who had spoken fewer words than anyone in the platoon across the entire training program. He stood between the wraith and Thawne's bleeding body, and he did not move. The creature lunged at him, and he took the hit. Its claws struck his ribs with a crack that everyone in the room heard. 3 ribs broke. HFY did not fall. He planted his feet, grabbed the creature's extended limb, and drove his combat blade into the joint at the base of its skull, exactly where Vazik had called it. The wraith shuddered. Its body flickered between solid and transparent, its armor plates grinding against each other. Ray's was there a second later, firing into the wound HFY had opened. Ochoa hit it from the other side. Vazik picked up a piece of broken laboratory equipment and jammed it into the gap in its plating. The creature collapsed. Its body solidified for the last time and went still. The laboratory was silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing and dripping fluid. HFY sat down against the wall, one arm pressed against his broken ribs. His face was tight with pain, but his eyes were calm. Thawne lay on the floor, his chest wound being treated by a Pelinari medic. He stared at the dead wraith and then at the 4 humans. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What are you?" he asked. It was the first honest question he had ever asked them. No mockery, no superiority, just a simple, genuine need to understand. Ray stood over the wraith's body. She was covered in its fluid. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline fatting. She looked at Thawne and answered with 2 words that carried the weight of an entire world behind them. "We are from Earth." Nobody spoke for a long time after that. The rescue shuttle arrived an hour later. All 46 researchers were alive. The platoon had 3 serious injuries and a dozen minor ones, but no deaths. In the Academy's command center, the senior officers reviewed the mission footage in silence. They watched Ray's draw the creature's attention with nothing but her voice. They watched Ochoa move through terrain that should have stopped him. They watched Vazik read a Class 10 predator like it was an open book. They watched HFY take a blow that would have killed most species and stay standing long enough to deliver the killing strike. The Academy commander, a very old Ilyari named Thessara who had seen 2 wars and 100 graduating classes, added a single line to the official file on human military recruits. Deathworld classification confirmed. Recommend expanded integration. Immediately. The Hall of Service was the oldest room on Vayara Prime. Its walls were lined with the banners of every platoon that had graduated with distinction in the Academy's 300-year history. Thousands of banners hung from the ceiling, each one carrying the names and species of soldiers who had gone on to serve across the coalition. Some of those banners were faded with age. Some were stained with marks that might have been ceremonial or might have been something else. Together, they formed a kind of fabric history, a record of every species that had ever fought for something larger than itself. Today, a new banner would join them. The hall was full. Recruits from other platoons filled the lower galleries. Officers and instructors lined the upper balconies. Representatives from dozens of coalition worlds had traveled to the station for this ceremony, and not because graduation was unusual. Graduation happened every cycle. They had come because of the story. The story of Platoon 07 had spread through the coalition like fire through dry grass in the 3 weeks since the Wraith incident. Not through official channels. Through whispers, shared messages, and video clips that someone had leaked from the observation drones. The footage of 4 humans killing a Class 10 predator with improvised tactics and barehanded fury had been viewed on every connected world in the coalition. But it was not the fight that captured people's attention. It was everything else. Species across the galaxy had begun pulling Earth's full files. Not just the ecological summary that Kael'vith had read months ago, but the complete record, the history, the culture, the wars. What they found was difficult to process. Humans had been fighting each other for as long as they had existed. Their recorded history was a continuous chain of conflicts, each one larger and more destructive than the last. They had developed weapons that could split atoms and release enough energy to flatten cities. They had built enough of these weapons to destroy their own planet several times over. They had come to the edge of self-extinction more than once and pulled back at the last moment, not because they could not do it, but because they chose not to. They had survived diseases that killed half their population and rebuilt within generations. They had endured ice ages, volcanic winters, famines, and floods. They had watched species disappear from their world at a rate that would have broken most civilizations, and they had kept going. And they had done something that no other species in the Coalition's records had ever done. They had reached their own moon before anyone came to help them. They had looked up at the sky from their deadly, violent, beautiful world and decided to go there. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, because it was there. This was what frightened the Coalition. Not the strength, not the endurance, not the fire or the intuition or the persistence. It was the combination. It was a species that was capable of unimaginable destruction and unimaginable kindness, and you could never be entirely sure which one you were going to get. Except that now, after watching Platoon 07, the Coalition had a better idea. They had watched 4 humans carry a wounded alien through a jungle for 11 hours because leaving someone behind was not something they were willing to do. They had watched a human woman kill a predator with a rock to save a squadmate she had known for 5 weeks. They had watched a human man stand between a wounded Gorath and a creature that could have killed him and choose to stay. The humans were not monsters. They were something more complicated. They were beings forged on a world that tried to kill them every single day, who had somehow emerged from that crucible with the ability to love as fiercely as they fought. Kael'veth stood at the front of the hall of service and looked out at the assembled crowd. Behind him, Platoon 07 stood in a single line, 23 soldiers, 8 Gorath, 4 Ilyari, 3 Pelennari, 2 Vethani, 2 from other species, and 4 humans. Thoin stood at one end of the line, his chest still bandaged from the wraith's claws. Scylla stood near the middle, her dark eyes calm and focused. Daral, the Pelennari who had been saved from the constrictor, stood tall and steady. Crystales, the Vethani who had been carried through the jungle, stood on a leg that was still healing but refused to sit. And in the center, neither ahead of the others nor behind them, stood Reyes, Ochoa, Vazik, and Akafer. Kael'veth had written his speech the night before. He had deleted it and written it again 3 times. In the end, he had set aside everything he had planned and decided to simply say what was true. "I have been an instructor at this academy for 12 years, he began. His voice carried through the hall without amplification, deep and steady. Before that, I was a soldier for 32 years. I have served alongside Gorath who could crush steel. I have fought beside Ilyari who could predict an enemy's movements before they made them. I have seen courage from every species in this coalition, and I have been honored to witness it." He paused. "But I have never seen anything like Platoon 07. The hall was very quiet. When the human recruits arrived, I expected them to wash out within the first week. They were small. They were soft. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no telepathy, no special abilities that I could identify. On paper, they were the weakest recruits I had ever been assigned." He looked at the 4 humans. Reyes met his eyes. Ochoa stood with his hands at his sides, his taped fingers finally healed. Vazik watched the crowd with her quiet, scanning gaze. Akafer looked straight ahead, solid as a wall. "I was wrong," Kael'veth said. "I was wrong in a way that I am still trying to understand. These 4 did not succeed because they were the strongest. They succeeded because they never stopped. They did not win because they were the fastest. They won because they refused to quit. They did not lead because they were given authority. They led because when things got hard, when the situation was at its worst, they were the ones still standing and still thinking and still fighting." I asked Corporal Reyes why she was the first to prepare when we received the distress call from the research outpost. She had not been ordered. She had not been asked. She simply heard that people were in danger and began getting ready. I asked her why, she said, because someone was in trouble. Calveth let those words hang in the air. Not a human, not a friend, not someone from her world or her species, just someone. That was enough. I have read Earth's file. I have read about their wars, their weapons, their history of violence. I know what they are capable of at their worst, but I have also seen what they are capable of at their best, and I believe, after everything I have witnessed, that their best is the truest part of them. Their world is called a death world because everything on it is trying to kill everything else. The ground shakes, the sky burns, the water drowns, the animals hunt. And in the middle of all that chaos, these small, soft, stubborn creatures looked at the darkness around them and decided to build fires. They decided to tell stories. They decided to protect each other, not because it was easy, because it was the only way to survive. That is what a death world produces. Not unfeeling killers, not invincible warriors. It produces beings who have seen the worst that existence has to offer and decided, every single day, to be kind anyway. He straightened. His chitin plates clicked softly. That is why Earth is called a death world. And that is why I am grateful, deeply and truly grateful, that they are on our side. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Thawne began to clap. It was a human gesture he had learned from Ochoa 3 weeks ago. The sound of his massive hands striking together echoed through the hall like thunder. Scylla joined him, then Dural, then Crystales, then every recruit in Platoon 07, then the galleries, then the balconies, then the entire hall of service. The humans stood in the middle of it and did not cry, though at least 2 of them came close. 6 months later, the 4 of them had scattered across the coalition. Reyes commanded a mixed-species rapid response team stationed on the frontier. Her unit had the highest mission success rate in their sector. Every member of her team, regardless of species, said the same thing about her. She never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. And she never, ever left anyone behind. Ochoa trained combat medics at a coalition hospital station. He taught aliens how to set bones, stop bleeding, and treat wounds under fire. His first lesson was always the same. Pain is information, he told them. It tells you something is wrong, but it does not get to decide what you do next. Vazek worked in military intelligence. She had a gift for reading patterns in data that computers missed. Her colleagues called it magic. She called it paying attention. She never fully explained how she did it, and the Ilyari analysts who worked alongside her eventually stopped asking. Akafar, the quiet one, had requested assignment to the most remote and dangerous posting available, a listening station on the edge of coalition space, where the stars grew thin and the darkness between them grew wide. He stood watch there with a small team of aliens who had all specifically requested to serve with a human. When asked why he chose the hardest posting, he gave a short answer that his teammates later had printed on a plaque and hung in their common room. Someone has to watch the dark. Across the coalition, things were changing. Recruitment applications from Earth had increased by 8,000%. Human volunteers were being assigned to units on every front, and everywhere they went, they brought their strange habits with them. On a frozen outpost near the Kethani border, a Goreth patrol team sat around a fire for the first time. A human private had built it using scraps from a broken supply crate. The Goreth had never felt open flame before. They sat close and said nothing, and felt something ancient and warm that they could not name. On a space station orbiting a gas giant, an Ilyari analyst and a human intelligence officer worked late into the night. The Ilyari reached out with her mind and felt the humans' thoughts. They were loud and messy and full of conflict, as always. But underneath all the noise, there was something steady, something that would not break. On a transport ship carrying wounded soldiers home, a Pelennori medic watched a human nurse sing quietly to a dying Vethani recruit. The song was in a language the Pelennori did not understand. The melody was simple. The Vithani, who could not speak, closed their eyes and became still, not dead, at peace. In the Academy's Hall of Service, Platoon 07's banner hung among the greatest units in Coalition history. It was blue and silver, and it carried 23 names in 23 different scripts. Beneath it, on a small metal plaque, were 2 lines of text. The first was in Galactic Standard, the common language of the Coalition. The second, added at Calvith's personal request, was in English. He had asked Reyes to choose the words, and she had chosen them without hesitation. The plaque read, "We don't leave people behind." And across the galaxy, in barracks and outposts and ships moving through the cold between the stars, beings from 100 different worlds read those words and understood, finally, completely, why Earth was called a death world. Not because of what it had made humans capable of surviving, because of what it had made them willing to do for others.